Story 1. They say the worst part of working the graveyard shift at Blackwood Penitentiary is the silence. They're wrong. The worst part is the sounds that break it. The scrape of a nail on concrete, a sudden cough from a cell you know is empty, the low, guttural whisper that seems to coil out of the ventilation system itself. I'd been a corrections officer for 15 years. I thought I'd heard them all. Then they brought in inmate 734. He was assigned to C Block, the old wing we only used for high-risk isolation. C Block is a place of perpetual cold, a long skeletal corridor where the air is thick with the ghosts of riots and forgotten cruelties. My partner, a jumpy kid named Ellis, called it the tomb. That night, it was just me walking the length of it, my boots echoing in the cavernous quiet. Inmate 734 was a scarecrow of a man, tucked away in the last cell. No history of violence, no gang ties. His file was thin, almost blank. His crime was odd. He'd been found in a family's home, not stealing anything, just sitting in their child's empty bedroom, drawing in a sketchbook. The family was on vacation. No one knew how he got in. My first round was at 0100. The only light in his cell was the dim yellow security bulb overhead. He was sitting on his cot, back to me, his shoulders hunched. A piece of paper was on the floor just inside his cell door. I nudged it with the toe of my boot, pulling it into the corridor. It was a charcoal drawing, crudely done but disturbingly precise. It showed a crow, its neck snapped, lying on a patch of gravel. I frowned. On my way in tonight, I'd seen exactly that by the parking lot gate, caught in the beam of my headlights. A coincidence. It had to be. I crumpled it up and moved on. My 0300 round was different. The silence felt heavier, more deliberate. As I approached 734's cell, I felt a prickling on my arms, the kind of static that raises your hair before a lightning strike. Another piece of paper lay in the same spot. My hand trembled as I picked this one up. It was a drawing of my partner, Ellis. He was depicted sitting in his beat-up sedan, his face a mask of sweaty desperation, a half-empty bottle of whiskey clutched in his hand. The detail was what chilled me to the bone. The small crack in the shape of a spiderweb on the corner of the windshield. The St. Christopher medal hanging from the rearview mirror. Ellis was a recovering alcoholic, something he guarded like a state secret. He'd been sober for 2 years, or so I thought. I looked through the slot in the cell door. 734 hadn't moved. He was still just a shape in the darkness. "How?" I whispered, my voice a dry rasp. "How do you know that?" No response. Only the low hum of the prison's electrical systems. I spent the next 2 hours in the guard station at the end of the block, watching the monitors, my coffee growing cold. My mind raced. The crow was a fluke. The drawing of Ellis. Maybe he'd overheard a conversation, picked up on something. I was a professional. I was letting this quiet little man get under my skin. My final round was at 0500, just before the morning shift arrived. The dread was a physical weight on my chest. I walked slowly, my footsteps unnaturally loud. As I neared his cell, I saw it. The final piece of paper. It was waiting for me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a visceral, primal urge to turn and run, to leave the paper untouched and never look back. But I couldn't. I knelt, my knees cracking, and picked it up. The drawing was of a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with pigtails and a gap between her 2 front teeth. She was smiling, holding a single wilted daisy. Behind her, a shadow loomed, a figure with no face, just an outline of a man. I dropped the paper as if it had burned me. My breath left my body in a ragged gasp. It was my sister Clara. She'd been taken from a park 30 years ago. They never found her. They never found him. And that gap-toothed smile, that was the last way I ever saw her. It wasn't a photograph that was ever released to the press. It was a private memory, a moment only I had witnessed just before she vanished. A secret I had locked away in the deepest, most fortified part of my soul. My eyes shot to the observation window of the cell. In the faint light, inmate 734 was finally turning around. His face was a canvas of wrinkles, his eyes 2 dark, empty pits. And for the first time, He spoke. His voice wasn't a whisper or a shout. It was the dry, brittle sound of dead leaves skittering across pavement. "I didn't draw that one," he rasped, a faint, terrible smile touching his lips. "He did. He's standing right behind you." Story 2. They called it Blackgate Penitentiary, but the cons and guards alike had a better name for it: the Tomb. Built in the late 1800s, it was a crumbling Gothic nightmare of granite and rusted iron, a place where hope was ground into the damp, cold stone. I'd been a guard on the night shift for 5 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. The shivs carved from toothbrushes, the 1,000-yard stares of the lifers, the desperate, guttural screams that echoed in the dead of night. I was wrong. I hadn't seen anything until they brought in Silas Blackwood. He was assigned to Cell Block D, the oldest and most isolated wing, reserved for the worst of the worst. On paper, Silas wasn't physically imposing. A small, wiry man with eyes the color of a stormy sea, and a stillness about him that was more unsettling than any crazed outburst. He was in for wiping out his entire family, parents, siblings, everyone, with a quiet efficiency that baffled investigators. No motive was ever found. My first night watching him was marked by an unnerving silence. The usual nocturnal symphony of coughs, snores, and whispered threats from the other blocks was absent in D Block. It was just me, the hum of the fluorescent lights, and Silas, who sat on his bunk, facing the wall, perfectly motionless. Around 3 a.m., it started. A whistle. It wasn't a tune I recognized. It was a thin, reedy sound, a melody that felt fundamentally wrong. The notes were discordant, slithering up and down a scale that didn't seem to exist. It had a strange burrowing quality, like it was trying to worm its way behind my eyes. I walked to his cell, my hand resting on my baton. "Blackwood, knock it off." He didn't turn. The whistling stopped. The silence that followed was somehow heavier, more menacing, than the sound it replaced. The next night, it began again. Same time, same eerie tune. This time, I didn't just hear it. I felt it. A cold dread coiled in my stomach. As the whistling continued, a flicker of movement caught my eye at the far end of the hall. A shadow, tall and gaunt, slipped around the corner. I called out, my voice cracking, and ran to investigate. Nothing. Just an empty corridor and the oppressive weight of the silence after the whistling ceased once more. It was the third night that things truly broke. The whistle started, and I gripped the edge of my desk, my knuckles white. Harris, a veteran guard with a face like a leather satchel, was on duty with me. He paled, his eyes darting into the darkened corners of our guard station. "You hear that?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Blackwood," I said. "He does it every night." "No, not him," Harris choked out, pointing a shaking finger towards the security monitor showing the empty hallway. "Listen." Underneath it, I strained my ears. Beneath Silas's alien melody, there was something else. A faint, wet sound. A soft, rhythmic tearing. And then, a child's giggle. Harris let out a strangled sob. That's my daughter," he gasped. "She died 2 years ago." He stared at the monitor, his face a mask of horror and grief. On the screen, a small, dark shape was beginning to form in the hallway, coalescing from the shadows. I couldn't take it anymore. I stormed down the hall to Silas's cell, the dissonant whistling growing louder, drilling into my skull. He was still sitting on his bunk, but now he was facing me. A slow, serene smile played on his lips. His eyes weren't stormy anymore. They were bottomless pits. "Stop it!" I yelled, my voice echoing in the stone corridor. "What are you doing?" The whistling pitched higher, and the air grew impossibly cold. The walls around me seemed to warp and breathe. The whispers started then, not in the hall, but inside my own head. They were my own regrets, my deepest fears, given voice. The memory of my brother's car accident, the last cruel thing I'd ever said to my father, the gnawing fear that I was a failure. They swirled around me, amplified by that terrible broken melody. Silas's smile widened. He wasn't whistling a tune. He was whistling a frequency. He was plucking the strings of our sanity, playing the music of our own personal hells. He was a conductor, and our minds were his orchestra. "Everyone has a song," he whispered, his voice a dry rustle of dead leaves. It was the first and only time I ever heard him speak. I just helped them hear it. I fled. I didn't stop running until I was outside in the pre-dawn chill, gasping for air that didn't taste of madness and stone. I resigned that morning. I told them I couldn't handle the stress. I never told them the truth. Who would believe me? It's been 10 years. I have a family now, a house in the suburbs, a life that's supposed to be normal. But Blackgate isn't a place you ever truly leave. Some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind is just right, I hear it. That thin, reedy whistle, carrying on the breeze. It reminds me that there are locks that can't hold every evil, and there are walls that can't contain every horror. And sometimes, the most terrifying monster isn't the one who wields a knife, but the one who hums a tune you can never, ever forget.